What's shaking, Bills fans? You've made it to Bills by the Numbers, where we let the stats tell you where the Bills are at. We're presented by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Coming up, in the wake of the 2023 NFL Draft, we're checking to see which rounds, besides the first in the Beane McDermott era, have provided the best bang for the buck, and which positions have proven most fruitful. NFL Network's Cynthia Freeland joins us in studio to see what her analytics say on the draft. And we ask our one burning question. Is it time for OTAs yet? Happy to have you with us. Bills Wall of Famer Steve Tasker, Bills insider Chris Brown with you. And on the heels of the 2023 NFL Draft, the Bills walked away with 6 prospects, tied for the smallest draft haul in the Beane McDermott era. The other was 2017, which, as we know, was just McDermott at the time. Now we all know, Steve, that round one often proves to be where the best talent is taken off the board. Duh. So we wanted to look beyond the obvious there and assess which rounds of the draft have given the Bills the most bang for their buck in the Beane McDermott era. Since it's probably not fair to count this year's draft, we'll go to the previous 6 drafts. If you had to guess which round has provided the most bang for the buck, Steve, what would your answer be?
I would say...
Do you have a round that you like?
You mean for starters? I mean, what's the criteria here?
Well, I mean, it could be, you're looking for best value that you got out of a round over the course of the last 6 years.
I'd say 3rd or 4th, maybe.
3rd or 4th for you. Okay. Yeah, I could get behind that. You got Taron Johnson and Gabe Davis in round 4. That's pretty good.
Yeah, Milano's around 5-er. Shakir's around 5-er. And of course, the 1st and 2nd round guys are going to hang around for a handful of years.
Right, and we're not counting round 1, really. Anything from 2 to 7.
Yeah, the closer to the top, the better. The 3rd round is probably as good as you can get. If, 2nd or 3rd or 3rd and 4th if I got to pick 2 in a row.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, they had some players in round 3 over the years. Harrison Phillips, Devin Singletary, Dawson Knox, Zach Moss, Spencer Brown.
Don't turn your nose up at Zach Moss. We traded Wyatt Teller, too, and he turned into an all-pro.
Well,
so we'll see.
That's true. And Wyatt Teller is the reason, Steve, why I have chosen round 5 for value. There are some misses, like Nathan Peterman and Voshan Joseph, but you do have all-pro Matt Milano and 2-time Pro Bowl guard Wyatt Teller, albeit in Cleveland, was where he earned those all-pros. And then you add in the promising end-of-season play from the guy you mentioned, Khalil Shakir, and the round could be even more fruitful. The only other round that comes close is round 4 for me, which you mentioned. Which remarkably in 6 years has had just 2 Bills picks, Gabe Davis and Taron Johnson. That's it. We don't pick in round 4. And we gave away our 4th this year, too.
100% they're batting, and
to
they got
trade
2
up.
really good ones. Yeah, it's an interesting study because no 2 drafts are the same, and it's strictly by happenstance. We can't really say it's strictly arbitrary.
There's work done.
Because they go in with about the same number of players in the pool, and it's my contention, and I made this point before in the Daily Show, once you get out of that 1st and 2nd round, the pressure's off these draft picks, and they can kind of open up and go free and easy. And they're the guys who are motivated internally flourish anyway. So you get some of these guys that are 1st-round draft picks, the expectations are too high. It's hard for them to live up to it, so they're always got that negative connotation, even if they have a nice career. Same thing with the 2nd round. Sometimes you get these 2nd-rounders with a chip on their shoulder because they thought they should have gone higher, and then then that propels them a little bit. But it's this doesn't last for your entire career. Although some took Thurman Thomas to the Hall of Fame. He was picked in the 2nd round.
On his couch waiting to get picked.
He had a chip on his shoulder the size of the stadium.
Well, I mean, Justin Shorter, who just got picked in the 5th round, he told us on the conference call, when I get my chance, I'm going to tear this league up.
It's amazing how this entrance to the league affects guys long term. No 2 guys are the same, but there are some generalities you can pull out of it. Like having a chip on your shoulder.
Right. I just recently saw footage from NFL Network's little teases they're putting out for NFL Network's program, Hey Rookie. And they have footage of Joey Porter Jr. sitting in the green room for the entire first round. The first round ends, and he's upset. And his dad's there, who we all know is Joey Porter, the former linebacker of the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Joey's an excellent player.
And he's whispering in his ear, and he goes, guess what this is? He goes, this is what you use as motivation.
Yeah.
And
yeah, you would think, though, a kid like, well, maybe, but
he goes,
the higher
don't
they go,
forget it.
They get these, they get a little bit entitled. We've seen it with high drafted quarterbacks at different places. The Cade McCowns and Chicago's, the Johnny Manziels, and the Ryan Leafs, and you can go down the list. Guys who come in and that's it. It's all downhill for them from there.
Yeah.
And then you got guys like what could be Joey Porter, who comes in, and or Thurman Thomas, or these guys who come in and say, okay, I got you now. Watch this.
Yeah. Joey Porter Jr. went to the Pittsburgh Steelers, where his dad played. So even more motivation to do good. Next up is position value. If you had to guess, which two positions do you believe, Steve, have been most fruitful among Buffalo's draft choices over the last 6 years? First, from a volume standpoint, while you're thinking about this, the three positions with the most selections in the Beane McDermott era.
All right. Got to be linebacker, corner, wideout.
Linebacker, yes. Wide receiver, yes. Cornerback, yes. You are 3 for 3. So, wide receiver, here's the rundown. Zay Jones, Gabe Davis, Isaiah Hodgins, Austin Prohl, Khalil Shakir, Marquez Stevenson, Ray McLeod, Justin Shorter. Corner, Taron Johnson, Dane Jackson, Saran Neal, Rashad Wildgoose, Christian Benford, and the new kid, Alex Austin. We're not counting first-rounders, in case people want to shout at their radios right now saying, what are you doing? You forgot Tre'Davious White. We're not counting first-rounders.
Even Tremaine Edmonds out of that mix.
Yeah. Linebacker, Milano, Tanner Vallejo, Voshan Joseph, Terrell Bernard, Balin Spector, Dorian Williams.
That's a lot of guys.
Yeah, I think the position value is corner.
Yeah.
I think it's corner.
Well, I'll say this. They got a bunch of really good corners. They know how to pick corners.
Oh, and I didn't even put Kyer Elam on there.
Right.
Oh, he's a first-rounder.
Yeah. They know how to pick those guys.
Yeah.
And coach them up, too, obviously. But
from value standpoint, yes, Zay Jones is still a starter in this league. Yes, Gabe Davis is a regular in the rotation at receiver. Isaiah Hodgins is still in the league for the Giants. Khalil Shakir is showing promise. Ray McLeod's a return man in San Francisco. Yeah. Despite all of that, though, Taron Johnson is a force.
Yeah.
He is a force.
He has
at
been
his position.
An incredible surprise.
And Dane Jackson he's probably on a par, maybe not quite the same level as a Gabe Davis is for this offense, but he's not far off.
Yeah.
Saran Neal is on a second contract as a special teams ace on this football team.
Yeah.
And then you got Benford. So, and then, we got to wait and see on Austin. But I think I might lean corner for position value here over the other two.
It's hard to get around.
We haven't seen enough from those young linebackers yet.
It's hard to get around Milano as a fifth rounder, plowing through and getting a second contract and being all pro.
But he's by himself there right now.
Yeah, he's by himself a little bit. And they only play 2, so the other guys are like just fill-ins, right? So we don't know how good they could be, right? They can't make an impact because they can't get on the field in front of Tremaine and Matt Milano. With the more open competition in this training camp is that I would anticipate. Maybe we'll find out about, Spector and Bernard and the rest of them.
Is
Williams.
there a more fruitful position than corner? And keep in mind, we're not even counting Trey or Kyer Elam with first-rounders out of the discussion. More fruitful position than cornerback over the years, just in general?
I would say probably tight end.
Tight end, okay. Dawson Knox.
Dawson Knox,
Not counting first rounders again.
right. And then
You got Tommy Sweeney.
Tommy Sweeney is the guy I was looking for. That's pretty, because they didn't pick very many of them. And,
That's
this,
it.
And this
Now you
guy
have
they picked,
Kincaid in round
Kincaid,
one.
who we can't count, which kind of colors my judgment maybe. But Sweeney, and Dawson in his second contract.
I might
there's
go
something
offensive tackle here. Because at least you got Deion Dawkins, your starting
Yeah,
left
Spencer
tackle,
Brown.
second-round pick. Spencer Brown, your starting right tackle. Tommy
Alec
Doyle,
Anderson.
fifth-round pick,
there. Alec Anderson.
undrafted. Luke Tenuta last year really
Mm-hmm.
didn't stick. I think he's in Indy now, though. So he's in the league. But you got your starting left tackle and your starting right tackle. So I think I would probably go offensive tackle for a fruitful,
that's probably a good one, too.
fruitful position. Let me ask you this. Can you argue kicker? Since the Bills are batting a very high percentage there in the draft, 1-for-1 in the Beane McDermott era. I mean, the kid is
You got his second
he
contract.
got his second contract, and he's borderline Pro Bowl material.
He's money, yes, absolutely. If he wasn't kicking in Buffalo, he'd be better.
I mean, if it wasn't for Justin Tucker and what's his name in Kansas City, I mean, he's probably a Pro Bowl guy for the
Butker?
AFC.
Is it Butker in Kansas City?
Yeah, Harrison Butker.
Yeah, I mean, and here's the thing too.
I mean, that's what he's up against.
We've seen
Tucker, the best kicker of the generation.
Yeah, Tucker comes in. He struggled in
Guy
this
locks up the AFC Pro Bowl
but
bid every year.
he also struggled in this building. Tucker did.
But that's
when
true.
They came in. Now,
That's true. He kicks in Baltimore.
He kicks in
albeit
Baltimore.
on grass.
It's on grass and it's all that. But in this building, in this region, Tyler Bass has been as good as any kicker this team has ever had.
Be an 87% kicker here. That's
In this building, yeah,
It's pretty
you're right. So yeah, that's.
You might have an argument there.
Well, it's 100. They're batting 1,000. So okay.
Well, let's see if the Patriots bat 1,000 after drafting a kicker and a punter. I mean,
we'll see.
They do what they do. We turn now to NFL Network analytics expert Cynthia Freeland to break down some of the nuanced statistical intricacies of the Bills' 2023 draft class. Here is Cynthia. All right, first, Cynthia, good to have you in here. I think you are our first in-studio pod guest, so
How
congratulations
appropriate as well.
on that.
This
Thanks
is
for
such
stopping
a
by.
special honor.
Yes.
Yes, it is. We've saved it for you.
No, I really appreciate that.
So good to see you. We usually don't see you until August,
Mm-hmm.
so this is a special early treat for us. But we're, chopping up draft stuff and
Love it.
positional value, round value, all that jazz. Was there anything in the Bills draft this year that you said, ooh, I like what they did there?
Well, I think the whole thing I liked.
Yeah.
First of all, I love finding out now that Latavius Murray and the signing of Latavius Murray coincided with the actual draft, because to me that's really smart. Instead of forcing some sort of square peg in a round hole, getting a running back in one of the later rounds that maybe wasn't exactly the right fit for what this entire organization wants to do. So love that. But I think the value, it's really hard to argue with the value you got at 59 for Osiris Torrance, who, by the way, I think every third mock draft, I actually think I might have mocked them.
Oh, yeah.
Osiris Torrance back in the
Everybody did.
beginning
Right,
had Torrance at least as a thought for the Bills at 27. So huge value all the way at 59.
And then, of course, you said it in the run-up to this. You love how teams doubled down.
I
So,
love that strategy.
Cyrus Torrance may be a great guy and all that, but also Broker, throwing him in at the end, a real tough guy down inside with some experience at tackle, but certainly kind of the make-sure pick.
Yeah, and I mean, look, both of the guards allowed exactly 0 sacks on passing snaps last season, which is very helpful.
Yeah.
But the interesting part, you actually saw it last year with Kyer Elam and then doubling down with Christian Benford. And then you saw the contribution that Benford made right off the bat. So the reality is I believe Brandon Beane and Coach McDermott when they talk about, once you get on the team, it's best player available. It doesn't matter where you were drafted. And getting that guard position right is really important, because the Bills, if you measure the distance from tackle to tackle, they actually line up wider than every other team, which means the gaps are bigger, which means the guards are important, which means, as you can see, this all flows down to Josh and pressure.
If you're measuring that, you're kind of a goner.
You're around the bend on that if you know all that stuff.
The Bills line up wider. Okay.
But the thing about that
Good
is,
for you.
and I
Did they just
Bless
did I
your
just get
heart.
insulted? As
Bless
the
your
first-
heart.
Bless your heart. That is
well,
okay,
the reason he
okay.
thinks you're around the bend is because there's no way in hell that Steve would spend the kind of time that you do on that stuff.
I got
He
things
just
I gotta-
wouldn't.
I got
he
things
just
I
flat
gotta
out
do.
Not
wouldn't.
all of us
I got-
can have your illustrious career
That's right.
that we can
That's
use
right.
to
That's
help
right.
us get
Yeah.
into this.
I got
right? Other
grandkids.
people
I got
need to
kids. I
measure
got
bums.
I got
Do
things I
homework.
got to do. You know, I got
Bums of linemen.
But
That's
you're-
what I meant. That's
right.
what I
But
got
you're
my whole
di-
master's thesis in.
bums alignment.
There you go. But your doubling down premise is something that Brandon Beane has done a lot.
A
Now,
lot.
on purpose, I don't know. He might just tell you, I'm just taking the best player available. But there is a long history there, even though he's only overseen 6 drafts now. You've got Spencer Brown and Tommy Doyle, same draft. Greg Rousseau, Boogie Basham, same draft, same position. You mentioned Benford and Elam. And I think
Spector and
then
Bernard.
right, and then you even had Gabe Davis and Isaiah Hodgins. So there are a lot of examples of that doubling down. In your conversations with general managers, has it ever come up where they talk about taking multiple swings at one position?
I have had a number of conversations with not only general managers, but also some of the regional scouts saying, this
personnel
guy
people.
would go with this guy would go with this guy, or we're just not great at coaching this position, or this is a new position for a new regime, right? Sometimes when teams switch over with a new coach and maybe there's a legacy GM, they're like, well, we have to think a little bit different, but there's always that kind of, it takes a minute for the left hand to talk to the right hand. So
And we've had the conversation, New England has trouble drafting wideouts, right? And, so teams do have kind of blind spots, Brownie calls them. But I want to ask you, too, we've seen in the run-up to this, we're light years beyond height, weight, and coming from a big school, right? Football factory. Now they're finding these guys everywhere. And in the history
Tulane?
history of the draft, we've had Hall of Famers who were undrafted rookie free agents and the first pick of the draft and everything in between. What are your thoughts on, the psychological profiling, the intelligence test, the S2 and the Wonderlic, the interview processes, and now teams hire psychologists to okay, what are we looking at? What's this guy like, kind of thing. What are your thoughts on all of that and how, because they still miss.
Yep. So there's some things that I think are really useful. So for example, look, any data point you're going to give any NFL team, they're going to at least look at to consider. But some things are a waste of your time and some things aren't. I'd be willing to say that C.J. Stroud, who many thought did not do well on the S2 test, or was at least widely reported, not by me, I didn't report it, I just listened to the reports, that maybe he didn't do well. But I watched his film from Ohio State, and I also spoke to his coach, and I also did a lot of computer vision study on him, and I still felt comfortable saying he is the most accurate and therefore highest floor quarterback in this draft. So in my opinion, it's kind of a little bit of this and a little bit of that. You need to be very honest with who you are and what a bill is, for example. And if you can say this person is a bill, this is a person we're willing to do this for or not that for. And you can't have a team of exceptions, but you should make exceptions for some people on the team.
How do you interpret conflicting information? That's a real problem, right? You got this guy says, well, I know he stinks. And this guy says, I don't know. I think he's the best thing ever, And then
that's why she did all the homework.
Right. They bring
she's
all the evidence.
Well, let me see. Right.
Yeah.
That's kind of your
It's
process.
the evidence that they look at,
Right.
but sometimes it conflicts.
Yeah, I guess at the end of the day, you have to say, all right, let's get my decision makers on my team on board, because you are looking for a bill, meaning you want to put a square peg in a square hole. You don't want to try to force just because consensus says that. See, for me, when I was watching Bryce Young, he had the best film in all of college football. When I map what I think is important and what my studies have shown, it says he could have a longer runway to becoming a great pro than other people, right? So that was what I was going off of. I go off of kind of my stuff, right? But I can't, who am I to say that whatever Scott Fitterer and Frank Reich did, they felt comfortable taking him 1 overall. It becomes more of a daunting task later on in the draft when you're talking about who can contribute on teams and is this person have a real chance to make our team, et cetera. That's where things become, you have to say, we are comfortable with these resume holes, or we are comfortable with this information saying that. To me, I think all the testing is great, but I think that you have to become really good interviewers. I would frankly spend the money that they spend on these like S2 or Wonderlic and teach my staff how to become better interviewers, because I don't think it's necessarily natural that just because I'm a VP of player development doesn't mean I know how to interview people. Maybe I've cultivated that, but I mean, a lot of people go to business school or learn. You have to learn those things. So spend the money on that to see if you like the person and you think you can teach them.
Ask the right questions so you get the answers.
Right.
That you're
Good
looking
data,
for from
good
them.
answer.
Yeah.
Bad data, bad answer.
And it's not really about the answers; it's how the guy answers. It's how he answers. You know,
Well,
it's who
it's
he
substance
is, right?
and the way
exactly.
in which he
Right.
answers. Yeah,
Right.
that's right. Premium positions, Cynthia, we hear them all the time now, and more we see teams in round one gravitating towards those quote-unquote premium positions: quarterback, pass rusher, corner, wide receiver, offensive tackle. I think I got all of them.
Yeah, you did.
And then we have the Bills, who trade up for a tight end, and on the outside, the immediate reaction was, tight end in the first round? Oh, my God. Now, as we know, there are always exceptions, and value for the premium positions changed right in front of them. Like 4 receivers went off the board in a row right in front of them. So there was no value left there. So what can you say about the Bills' pick of Kincaid? I don't know if you have any analytic data on him that you'd like to share. But what can you say about that when you say, when people on the outside say, wow, tight end's not a premium position. Why are you taking that in the first round?
Well, 2 things. The first is that this draft was widely believed to be maybe not as deep of a first-round talent draft as we've seen in recent seasons. Like, we've seen wide receivers that have been absolutely huge contributors in the middle of the second round in the past 2 seasons. This season, that wasn't necessarily what the consensus belief was or what the data would suggest. Second, just in general, I think if you were to ask a lot of evaluators, and I asked a lot, how many players in this draft are truly like what we'd think first round? It's like maybe 15. So in some ways, you could consider Kincaid as a second-round pick just from the level of talent that was available for kind of everyone. And it is probably the best tight end draft we've seen in a really long time. So you're getting the best tight end, and you're getting him in a spot. 25 is late. It's not like you're picking him. You didn't pick him, 5th, right? This is a much later pick. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is how will you use Kincaid? And the amount of use and utility, being able to use 12 personnel in such an interesting way with Josh Allen, meaning you'll be able to have him catch passes. You'll be able to have him help you stay. You were best on third down last season. The Bills were number 1 on third down conversions. That's an area where people will be gunning for Josh. Like, you're really going to let him do that 2 years in a row to you? So you have to change the strategy. And I believe Brandon and Coach, when they talk about that Cole Beasley-like factor, not that he's Cole Beasley, but that factor of like just confusing that like area in between the hashes and making everyone have to get, maybe it creates more space for some of the guys on the perimeter. Okay. Or maybe it's Kincaid himself that can. Okay, who cares who?
Right.
It's the net effect of all of it. So he's helpful on third down, probably the most crucial down. That's going to be huge.
All right, so we've got all this stuff about, everybody snap judge all these teams like 2 hours after the draft.
Why
right?
wouldn't you? Because what else does anyone have to do on a Thursday
and
night?
not only that, let's mock draft next year already.
Absolutely.
Right? So, but when you see teams that are consistently good or GMs that everybody misses, what is the philosophy between, of course, the need that your team has on a roster? You trying to get you try to go to the draft without a need, so you can get the best player available. It's really hard to do. And how do you balance that with a draft board that's shallow at the top? It's like there's not that many good guys left, but you got to draft a need, you got to draft the best player available, and you got the mix of a draft board that's really not that enticing.
Get clear on what it is that you believe you want to do and make sure you can do that. Clearly, now after the draft, we can see interior offensive line was an area of need, an area of focus, something that, whatever, you got the guy, right? Those long arms, like that is the prototype for a Bill. And he's like, that man's massive.
Right.
Osiris Torrance is huge, like 34-inch arms. Like
his feet are this long and they're flat. I mean, they're, you can't move him.
No, I wouldn't want to try, actually.
Right.
No,
So
thank you.
He's built for it.
But so it's you're lucky though. Like sometimes you have to match your needs with what is on the board. There were some guards that, like, if you needed a tackle, you would have had to trade up. You know, and that was just the way that it was going to fall, right? But if you wanted to, I mean, I guess Jacksonville sort of, they traded down and still got Anton Harrison, but so whatever. But like, you know, if you wanted one of those really elite tackles, you had to trade up. But you didn't need that. So what you're doing now is you're saying, okay, our priorities are X. And like I said about the running back example, you could say that the Bills went into the draft needing a running back. Well, they got one. They didn't necessarily draft one, but they still got their running back, and it was during draft time.
Last question for you. Back to premium positions. Are we getting to a point in the league now where teams with, for example, franchise quarterbacks that are gobbling up a lot of the cap are leaning towards premium positions throughout their draft selections to keep costs low at the high-priced positions? Corner, wide receiver, edge rusher. I'm going to give you an example. If you look at Kansas City's draft, every single pick they made, with the exception of one, which was a defensive tackle, every other pick was a premium position. Defensive end, corner, wide receiver. They didn't draft a quarterback. They don't have to. But you know what I'm saying. Almost their entire draft class were premium positions. Are GMs moving in that direction to keep costs low at the high-priced positions?
I think they'd ideally like to, right? We saw the cap go up about 8 percentage points this past season, and quarterback pay is going up way higher than that, a much faster rate.
For sure.
It's definitely outpacing it. So what I would say is that people would ideally like to draft those premium positions, and that's why you saw 6 trades in the first round. I mean, there were some teams that did some stuff that would be counter-indicating to that, like the Lions, but drafting a high running back and a high linebacker. But at the end of the day, I mean, the NFC, you don't necessarily, they've got a top 5 quarterback, and that's not the same.
It's the relegation conference.
It's not wrong. But look, but at the end of the day, you'd love to keep those premium positions down. But
labor.
I'll say this though, look at the Chiefs as an example.
But they had to.
Yes, but they were willing to say goodbye to maybe the most dangerous wideout in the league today, and Tyreek Hill. Say, listen, we didn't want to pay him. We're keeping costs low. It's hard to say goodbye to a difference maker.
She has a counterpoint.
I do have a counterpoint, because what my knowledge and belief is about that situation was when they agreed to make that trade, one, they were talking about price and how to keep everything in the cap, because they were deficient at corner. They had 9 rookies playing the Super Bowl. So that's just, you don't always get that lucky. Let's be clear. You don't always get that lucky. But they were comfortable letting him go because they were like, all right, we're going to use Travis in a different way. Sure. Travis lined up in completely different spots this season than he had the prior 3 seasons. We're going to figure out with these wide receivers that are available, because there were so many wide receivers in the draft, there were more free agent wide receivers that they could at least get a year of tread on. They weren't trying to keep everyone. Clearly they didn't, right? Yeah. So they looked at the market. They said, we have Patrick. We're going to get production out of this. We need to address our O-line. We need to figure this out. And then this year we got Frank and Chris. We're not going to be able to keep Frank and Chris next year. So we have to keep planning for that. But at the same time, they are paying premium positions very highly, not corner, but the other ones they are paying very, 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 very well. Right. But they were able to do that because they said, we're going to pay Travis, we're going to pay Patrick, we're going to pay Chris, and work from that. That's the nucleus. But they found needs based on the market, what's available.
Cynthia, such a treat to have you here in May. Thank you for stopping by here on Bills by the Numbers. We appreciate it. And all of your NFL Network nerdy number insights.
Thank you. I love having my nerdy number insights.
They're really great. So thanks for that and
Awesome.
breaking down the Bills draft. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
We remind you that we are brought to you by FanDuel, an official partner of the Buffalo Bills. Download the app today and make every moment more. The app is easy and simple to use with generous promotions offered every day, safe and secure with the best in-class customer service, and your winnings paid out in as little as 2 hours. Time to spin the wheel on the numbers game, and for Steve this time around, we're going to see how well Steve knows the Beane McDermott draft era. Steve, are you ready?
All right, let's go.
We're going to see if Steve can guess what positions were picked the most from 2017 to 2023 in certain rounds. So we'll begin, Steve, with what position do you believe was the most popular for the Bills in the Beane McDermott era in the 6th round. A lot of picks in the 6th round. Let me count them up. 3, 6, 9, 10, 11 picks in the 6th round
Well,
over
from the
Beane
conversation we had a minute ago, I would have said corner, but I think I'm going to say wide receiver.
And you would be correct by a hair. Wide receiver, 3 picks in round 6. Very good.
Who is it? Who are they? Do you know?
Ray McLeod, Isaiah Hodgins,
Okay.
and Marquez Stevenson.
Oh my gosh! Wow.
Corner had 2, safety had 2.
That'll tell you how hard this. Yeah, it's a hard team to get on, man.
Well, yes. It's not like those were bad picks. It's just good luck getting on this roster.
Right.
And sticking.
Yeah.
Even on the practice squad. I mean, think about Hodgins.
Hodgins goes to New York and starts catching touchdowns
He's
right
like,
away.
he finished second on the team in receiving touchdowns. He was on the practice squad here for 3 years.
He
could not get on the field.
Could not get on a game. He could not get a game day jersey.
Yeah. I liked him when they picked him.
Yeah.
Question number 2. There is a 3-way tie for positions most often selected by the Bills in the Beane McDermott era for round 5. I need you to guess 2 of those 3 positions.
Linebacker.
That is 1, correct? You need 1 more.
Corner.
It is not corner. I'll give you 1 more shot at
All
it.
right.
You got
5th
2
round. Offensive. Can I say offensive line or FC tackle?
Offensive line is fine.
Offensive line.
That's still wrong. So, that's why it was fine.
Fine. Yeah,
so
you say
here-
whatever you want.
The 3-way tie for positions most often selected by the Bills in the Beane McDermott era, round 5. Linebacker, as Steve guessed. Wide receiver again.
Man. Again.
And quarterback.
Quarterback?
Jake Fromm, Nathan Peterman. Both 5th-round picks.
Wow. Okay. You
Yeah.
got me on that.
That was something else. Yeah, the receivers were Shakir and Shorter, the last 2 years.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Question 3. Can you name all 4 defensive ends taken by the Bills in the draft in the Beane McDermott era?
Sure.
All 4 defensive ends picked.
Boogie Basham, Greg Rousseau,
Correct.
AJ Epinesa,
Yep, 3 for 3. Can he get the last one? This one's the toughie.
Shaq Lawson.
Nope,
Oh,
that's
that was-
before. That was the year
that was-
before they got here.
Dang it. All right, hold on.
2016. I will give you a hint. 7th-round pick.
Is he still on the roster?
He is not, but he is still in the league.
No, it's not Harrison.
I'll give you
Phillips.
another hint.
No.
He was traded.
Oh, jeez. I drew a blank completely. That you just like
That
turned
didn't
my,
help
you just
you.
turned my light out.
I'm trying
You may as well turn my light out.
I thought that would help.
I'm trying to think. You know how when you're trying to think of something, they say something, and it totally takes you off track. They traded him. Wait.
7th-round pick. He played on. This will help you.
Who'd they trade him to?
He played
No,
on
don't tell me.
special teams.
Oh, yeah. The big guy went to Carolina. Johnson.
Daryl Johnson. There you go, Steve.
Great special teams. I should have known that.
I should have given the special teams guy the special
Oh,
teams
man,
clue first
that's
instead
right.
of the trade clue.
That was he was a good player, man. He's
Yeah.
still playing.
Last question. What percentage of Bills draft picks from 2017 to 2023 are still on Buffalo's roster? So keep in mind, we're counting this year's draft class. They're all here right now, so they count. So what's the percentage of Bills draft
say-
choices over the last 7 drafts
A good
still on the roster?
hitting it out of the park is getting 50% of them right. I'm not going to say 50. I'll say 40%.
It's actually 57%.
Really?
29 out of 51 picks still on Buffalo's
Wow,
roster.
that's really
pretty good. I did not take the time to see what the league average is, but I would venture to guess that is above the league average. Because I tend to think you're on the money with.
It's hard. Every one of these picks from the first round all the way down to the 7th round is a coin flip is where they're going to be any good, if bust or not. But if you got, as you get it, if the higher rounds, they stick around whether they're good or not.
Yeah.
So that skews that number. A 7th rounder, they kick to the curb fast. So those guys really got to be good.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of skews the numbers on both ends. But if you can bat a 500
Yeah.
1 out of every 2. That's why everybody wants so many draft picks. You
Yeah.
got a chance. That's where that's
Pretty good job there in the
pretty
numbers
good, man.
game.
Above
And
50%.
It is an encouraging percentage for sure. It's time to discuss roster breakdown. Roster breakdown, Chris. What are you, nuts? In May? Yes, because it's our one burning question. With the addition of free agent defensive tackle Poona Ford just 3 days after the draft was over, what do you think the breakdown of the defensive line will be, Steve, if they only keep 9 on the active roster? Last year, they kept 5 defensive ends, 4 defensive tackles. Does it flip this year, knowing Poona Ford is the 5th defensive tackle added to the core 4 on the roster from last year?
I do not. I think they're going to, if they stay with that, I think they're going to have 5 defensive ends. It's going to be Groot, Rousseau, Shaq, Epinesa, Boogie, and Von Miller. Vaughn, they list Vaughn as a linebacker, but
Right, but we know they list him as that so
Right.
that he can wear jersey number 40.
right. So they got those 5 guys, and on the defensive tackle, you got to think Poona Ford is on, Daquan, Jordan Phillips, and Ed. So that means you might have to say goodbye to Brandon Bryant
Well, that's
and Tim Settle.
yeah, the Tim Settle is the if then.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this: do you think they keep 10
I do.
defensive linemen?
I do.
Here's where I think you
They'll
can.
keep-
This
they'll
is
keep
what I
10.
think you can do, because as you know, you've got to rob from one position to accommodate
Right.
another. You only put 2 linebackers on the field. Last year, Steve, they carried 7 linebackers
Right.
for a team that only plays 2. And I understand the special teams dimension, but
Right.
7? That's
Here's-
fat.
Here's what I've been thinking about. And you talk about roster breakdown. I think one of the reasons they played 2 linebackers constantly, nickel defense, was Tremaine. And I think with a new defensive coordinator and new combinations they can go with at linebacker, we may see this team get out of that.
I'm thinking more 3 safety.
Yes, maybe. Either way, I think they're gonna have more personnel combinations defensively than we've seen over the last 4 years because of now that Tremaine is out of the mix.
All right, so now that we're saying that, do you still think that this team's going to need 7 linebackers? No, right?
No.
So I think
No.
6 tops, like
Right.
maybe even 5. Maybe even 5.
Yeah, and I'll say this: all your linebackers, if without Tremaine in the mix, all your linebackers are now kind of the same guy anyway.
Yeah.
The guy that stands out is A.J. Klein because he weighs 250 pounds. Everybody else is Milano, Dorian Williams, Bernard.
Yeah, I think Dodson's the only other guy over 235.
Right. So
Klein is 240, and I think Dodson's like 238.
now you're going to need some guys to cover kicks, and I get all of that. But you do have a wide receiver come into there that weighs 228, 6'4", 228, who can cover kicks. So that's
I see 10 defensive linemen on this roster. I also see 10 offensive linemen on
Shorter
this roster.
Shorter can take one of those linebacker spots on special teams because he's pretty good at it.
He's going to be in the running for a gunner.
Right. Well, he'll play gunner too, but it's all the same.
Like the Jake Kumaro role.
Right.
You
Whatever
know what I mean?
whatever spot that is. So, yeah, I'm with you. And because all the linebackers are kind of the same guy, you do need some beef up front to protect those guys in the run game.
Yeah, because they're all smallish.
They're all smallish. So that may be the robbing Peter to pay Paul and put the weight from the linebacker position up into the front four.
So maybe the burning question was asked incorrectly. Do you see 10 defensive linemen on the roster?
I kind of do.
I think so.
I think so.
I mean, I guess unless somebody performs poorly, somebody has a bad camp or a bad preseason.
It's striking that they would not get out of 2 linebackers last year, yet carried 7 on the game day roster.
Isn't that crazy? I mean,
That
I
is-
get special teams being important, but that almost seemed like a luxury exercise.
And might be, and maybe Matt Smiley has that kind of juice, and he said, "Listen, I'll do it, but you got to give me these guys on."
Yeah.
And they got to do it. But you got to think too. I'd kind of like to see him carry 7 wideouts as well.
Yes.
With the return, both kickoff and punt return being 2 different guys, theoretically.
Yeah.
And having enough guys to multiple your offense with different roles. I
didn't do the roster stats last year on the breakdown of how many teams carried 7 receivers. 2 years ago, there were 5 teams that carried 7 receivers. Were there more last year? I'll have to go back and look. Maybe that's a future Bills by the Numbers podcast subject. But I'll have to check to see if the number's increasing or staying flat or decreasing. Because, as we know, more and more every year, it's a throwing league, and you need those bodies. We'll see. I'm very interested. Now I'm interested. Now I'm going to have to go back. I'm going to have to see see what the prospects are for the likelihood of the Bills, moving in that same direction. They may not because of the player they just took in the first round, Dalton Kincaid. They may not.
Right. And also, they don't have that many guys. I mean, Kincaid's going to be one guy, but he can't be 2. I mean, they got 3 tight ends.
But once again, you're running into that position balance. Where are you going to take 7 if you have a
there's a couple of wild cards.
7?
Right, there's a couple of wild cards in it. Sean McDermott's calling the defenses. He might have a different philosophy, and the personnel needs may change as a result. We don't know any of that.
Yeah, going to be some juicy discussion points come roster
Put you on.
time.
That's your assignment for training camp. What kind of personnel?
Fair enough. I will jot that down
so I don't have to.
Our closing figure deals with Bills draft choices who participated in the Senior Bowl. I thought you would find this interesting, Steve. During the Beane McDermott era, 49% of their draft choices participated in the Senior Bowl. 25 of their 51 picks since 2017 went down to Mobile, practiced, and played during the week. Buffalo picked 3 more this year: Osiris Torrance, Dorian Williams, and Nick Broker. It makes a difference for players that are eligible for that game to get down there and compete.
And I get it that some of these guys, Bryce Young and Will Anderson and some of the guys at the very tippy top of the draft, it's not.
They
for
don't
them.
need to be.
It's not for them. But for guys like you're talking about who are in the mix for a lot of teams, maybe because of how the draft order comes down, it's invaluable. I really recommend young guys getting as much exposure to that as possible because they're getting in front of pro coaches, standing right there watching you practice, watching you get coached, watching you adjust yourself, watching how you interact with your teammates. That is as good as it gets for giving teams as much information as they can as they may draft.
And then secondarily, it's also good for them on-ramping to the NFL because they're getting coached by NFL coaches.
That's right.
So they'll see, this is kind of what a practice week is like. Okay, you know what I mean? All that stuff. So, it's beneficial in a number of ways. And our good friend Jim Nagy, who runs that thing down there, he's really... It's blossomed under his leadership.
The Senior Bowl is absolutely a revolving door towards the draft. Guys that go there get drafted. Because teams get to know them. And unless you got something to hide or protect, you need to play in that game.
Yeah. That'll do it for this edition. Be sure to subscribe on whatever podcast platform you use so you know when the next episode comes out. And remember, when you need to know about the Bills, you need to check Bills by the Numbers. For Steve Tasker, I'm Chris Brown. We'll catch you next time, everybody!